Welcome to the November meeting of the Wyoming Board of Education. We have already started our meeting because we were in executive session for 2 items. We are now out and we are ready for recognition of the public, but we do not have anyone this evening. So we will go right into a presentation by our treasurer on the 5-year forecast.
Take just a second here to get set up. I'm gonna go there, that's okay.
Don't worry, everything. Let me know when you want me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's your right hand, that's what it is.
I don't think I could do it for us.
I know, I don't either.
I will remember that. No, you hit the spot that the left person left.
It doesn't matter.
You're being very patient. Excuse me.
Doesn't matter.
I'm waiting for Susie.
Oh.
I'm waiting for it to pop up.
I want to get going.
Relax, you're like about to swing somebody. Even away from my potassium.
Just move anything. Sorry.
I'm not gonna touch any of yourself at home.
I got a whole set of them.
I'm not gonna add anything or I'm not gonna pass you anything. I'm not gonna receive anything.
Here we go. Through the window? Yeah, must be. Actually, I can feel it.
All right, so November is the time of year that the board approves the 5-year forecast. The November edition of the forecast is on the agenda for the board's consideration tonight. We do this twice a year, so just a few reminders about the 5-year forecast. It is a statutory requirement. The Ohio Revised Code requires all public schools to adopt a forecast twice a year, once in the spring and May and once in November. It includes 3 years of historical revenues and expenditures, and then 5 years of projections. Current fiscal year 24 and 4 additional fiscal years. It is a general fund only report. It reports the general operation of the district, but not all of our financial activity. Our bond retirement funds, we've been talking about those funds a lot lately. Our permanent improvement fund, all of our student activity funds, none of those are included. This is a general fund only document. And we are modeling based on the best data that we have available today. So the forecast is accurate right now today. Here we are, November 27th, but those are all just based on assumptions. So just important to remember that we're modeling based on all of the data we have available to us. We are going to start with revenue. And here in Wyoming, we get our revenue from really 3 material sources. Real estate taxes or property taxes is our most material revenue source. 40% of our general fund revenue comes from real estate taxes. 32% comes from income tax. So added those together, about 72% locally funded district. About 20% from the state, and then a few other very small categories. When we think about our real estate taxes, we just need to remember that we passed our last operating levy in May of 2017, an 8 mil operating levy. And really, since we started full collection on that levy, which happened in 2020, it's been in essence flatlined. We don't gain any additional revenue unless we pass an additional operating levy. So we've talked about that a lot in recent meetings when we've been talking about property values going up. And so again, just a reminder that even though the values are slated to increase effective January 1st, 2023, I mean, that's a pretty significant value change. The millage will go down so that we'll collect in essence the same amount of revenue. And you can see that crystal clear on this chart, okay? Of course, most people know that our tax base is about 95% residential, because when you look around Wyoming, not a huge commercial industrial tax base and just a sliver of public utility. So 95% residential. So it is our homeowners who are paying 40% of our general fund revenue. So then we'll move on to our second most material revenue source, which is income tax, about 32%. The district is collecting on 2 voted school district income taxes. The first in November of 1989 at 0.75%. The second was approved in May of 1994 at 0.5%. So total collection, 1.25% income tax. When you look at our 23-year history, the average growth is about 3%, but certainly we have some volatility in our collection, right? And if you kind of go back into history, some of these might make sense. Like you see the recession here, right? You kind of see a little bit of COVID. You can see some other blips along the way. So again, our 23-year average is 3%, and that's what we had been modeling. Some outliers, fiscal year 21 coming out of COVID was a 0.74% decline. In fiscal year 22, we had been forecasting 1.5% growth, again, still coming out of the pandemic, but we actually collected almost 10% growth. Our fiscal year 23 number was forecasted at 6%, actual 6.91, so a little closer to our forecast there. At this point, we had been forecasting 3%, but as of today, our fiscal year 24 to date, we're actually down about 2%. So we have modified this forecast for 24. We've adjusted that to 0% growth, you know, looking at this number, the current collection, but we have resumed the 3% moving forward. So again, talking about modeling based on the information that we have today, this is something that we monitor on a quarterly basis. We receive quarterly distributions from the Ohio Department of Taxation. And so we look at that in depth in Finance Committee as a board. And if we see any other adjustments, we would be making a shift in the May version of the forecast as well. But for now, we have modified the fiscal year 24 projection to flatline to 23, and we've resumed that 3% moving forward. Again, about 32% of our total revenue. So when it's our second most material revenue source. So sometimes this volatility is a little tough for us to handle. Right? When you think about modeling, a 3% growth and all of a sudden you're down 2%, that's a 5% swing, compounded moving forward. So those are things that why we take such a deep dive in understanding the components of our income tax collection. Moving on to state funding, our third material revenue source, it's about 20% of our total revenue. The state is continuing to phase in the new fair school funding model. But for us here in Wyoming, the result is really no new funding. So we should call it maybe the no new funding model here in Wyoming. In fiscal year 19, we got just shy of $6 million in state funding. Now we are hovering around 5.8 million. And over the life of this forecast, it is not forecasted to shift. We are on what's called the guarantee in the formula, which means that we are just guaranteed back to a base amount. And again, not projected in the formula to receive any increases. When you think about the fair school funding model, it was intended to direct money to areas across the state that had higher poverty. We are deemed a wealthy state in terms of or wealthy school district in terms of the formula in the state size. So we are not slated to get any additional revenue over the life of this forecast in state funding. We really, through advocacy, are trying to just hang on to everything that we have. Every biennium budget is just, continued advocacy from public schools, us in Wyoming, and then of course, public schools in general, to make sure that we continue to be able to get adequate funding from the state.
Question.
Yeah.
Are we twice whatever the limit is that would have any impact on that? And ultimately, there's just no way it's ever going to shift or change, or how close are we to?
We're not close. And so I would say at this point, we're a couple $100,000 on the guarantee, and then continued over the life of this forecast to get upwards close to $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're moving more on the guarantee as opposed to closer to the formula.
Mm-hmm.
What would impact that drastically would be an abundance of student enrollment, but our student enrollment would actually have to, I would say, almost double, which of course isn't going to happen. I mean, like there isn't capacity in our school community to have enrollment double. It's just not something that, and certainly, again, we've looked at our enrollment forecast. We do that a couple times a year. No indicators of that happening at all. So, for us, it's just a matter of continuing to advocate to hang on to the state funding that we have. Good questions. Okay, so talked a lot about revenue. Now let's shift to the expenditure side of the ledger. Salaries and benefits. That's about 80% of our budget. And that really is a benchmark across public schools in Ohio, because if you think about what we do, we hire staff members to serve kids. And so right in line with the benchmark across the state of about 80% of our budget, includes salary and benefits for about 230 staff members, both certified and classified, 60% salaries and about 20% in the benefits. Again, expected to have some growth over the life of this forecast. Expecting those percentages to go up just a bit over the life. But again, right in line with the benchmark of school districts across the state. Our next largest component, I should say that we'd like to think about this in terms of a fixed cost. You know, we certainly work really hard to hire the best individuals to work with our staff. And oftentimes you hear school districts who find themselves to have a need to reduce expenditures. You know, they often talk about reducing staff. And sometimes I think folks have a hard time understanding that when your budget, 80% of your budget is salaries and benefits, this is the meat of your budget. And if you need to make cuts, this is the only thing that you can cut to really sometimes hit the threshold that you're looking for. That's not where we are. It's a good perspective for folks. Because when you think about our next line item, when you think about purchase services, again, these are really fixed costs. And often you can relate to these when you think about your home budget. These are utilities and insurance and transportation and a minimum level. Like you have to have a minimum level of custodial and maintenance services. You know, in 2024, there's, you know, technology services continue to be more important than ever. We have to have subs to serve our kids when our staff are out. There's, you know, student services that are in here. And I've listed a sample of those before because I feel like sometimes people think, oh, 12% or, you know, maybe $3.8 million, you know, that should be a super easy place for you to cut. Well, okay, like which of these is the first? Do we just not have water and lights? Do we not have subs? Do we not have transportation? Do we not clean the buildings? You know, like there's just really a minimum level of these services. And so this is as much of a fixed cost for us as that 80%. So about 12% of our budget, about $3.8 million. And so then what's left? Really just materials and supplies and capital outlay. And so this is really what our staff uses every single day with our kids. So instructional materials, technology devices and infrastructure, and then, you know, capital outlay. So this is what our students are using in their classrooms every single day. But again, really only 3% of our budget. If we had to, we could cut all of this. We actually couldn't, but that still doesn't make a difference. When your budget is 80% salaries and benefits, the staff costs are sort of the meat of what's happening. And so we add all of those together and we need to sort of think about from a really big picture, what does that mean in terms of our financial stability in the future? And so we think about our financial stability as a school district in terms of our cash balance. And so we're starting this fiscal year with cash balance of about $9 million and anticipated revenue of about 29.6, anticipated expenditures of about 29.8. So this year we are forecasting to deficit spend. For the past 6 years, we have had a revenue surplus. So we've had a balanced budget. We've not been deficit spending. This is just where we are in the levy cycle. We passed our last levy in 2017. This is the natural flow of a school district that at some point your expenditures will outpace the revenue. Because what did we learn when we were looking at our revenue components? Property tax, our most material revenue source, no growth unless you pass a new levy, right? What did we see about our income tax? Yeah, we had some growth, but what's happening right now? We're seeing a decline. So, you know, we've enjoyed some healthy years and that has helped us stay off the ballot since 2017. But, you know, that's why we're monitoring that very closely. If collections continue to come in really off trend or off that 3% growth, then, you know, these numbers would shift a bit. So we are approaching the point in our levy cycle that we would need to think about an additional revenue. And so that number for us, again, thinking about our cash balance benchmark, the board established its benchmark of $5 million several years ago. And that's sort of our cue as a leadership to say, okay, $5 million is what we need in order to meet our cash flow needs and really just maintain financial stability over the life of the fiscal year. And so when we drop below 5 million, that's our cue to say, hey, we either need to think about finding ways to reduce expenditures, increasing revenue, or some combination of both. That is the decision of every public school district at some point in their levy cycle. We're just approaching that point. Okay, we have a couple years to figure it out. You know, if every single number on this forecast was 100% accurate, which we already know that it's not because we're just modeling some trends, then this would say that we would be looking at some sort of additional revenue need in fiscal year 26 to collect in fiscal year 27. That's what this would suggest right now. So we have a couple years to plan through that. Again, after 6 consecutive years of balanced budgeting, forecasting deficit spending, it's a small amount, about $200,000 again, just, you know, for fiscal year 24. We are continuing to watch economic indicators, impact on state and local revenue, continuing to feel inflationary pressure on our expenditures. And we are, planning for a future operating levy that is inevitable. It will come at some point in time because that is the way that school funding is designed in the state of Ohio. So it's just a matter of when it shows up in our forecast.
And this would be an operating levy, not the bond levy that we're talking about in terms of building.
Yes, very different. So the bond issues are specifically for building, would be a certain amount of millage to make the principal and interest payments on the debt. This would be an operating levy that we would generate additional revenue to meet the expenditure needs that we talked about in the expenditure categories.
On the operating levy, I remember in 17, there was this discussion that it should last us a certain period of time. That's always fluid. I thought that if you were saying we may with this, it's like a 26, 27, that's a 10-year window.
If we make it to
versus what
27, that would be 10.
Well, versus what I thought was like a 4 or 5 year projection.
Yeah, I would think originally the initial plan might have been 3 to 4.
3 to 4.
Now we had some healthy income tax collection.
Okay.
We had a global pandemic that impacted us on the expenditure side, but also we did receive some federal dollars to support those needed expenditures. So lots has happened. Lots has happened since that last levy. You know, and we operate, you know, with a financial stewardship mindset. It's one of the pillars of our strategic plan. And so, you know, we're constantly having these conversations about making sure that our expenditures are aligned with the pillars of our strategic plan. Happy to answer any questions.
Because it's just off of Ilias, because I remember getting onto the board and thinking, wasn't it 12 years prior to that? Because it really extended a fairly good amount so
Sure.
that we were prepared to be like, that's not gonna happen again, right? But already to think we were prepared and looking that it could feasibly be.
Yeah, so from 17 on, the income tax collection looks a little different than maybe some of these years prior, right? We took some pretty good dives here.
Yeah.
Right? And income tax is really going to be the trigger of where we land in terms of the year. I mean, if our collection remains healthy and we can stay on a 3% trend, that is helpful. If we start to see some consecutive years of downturn, then that's gonna maybe shift our timing a bit. If we have some really healthy years, similar to 22 and 23, it will continue to prolong.
I'm glad you guys do the cash balance. I mean, surely a few years ago to really have that conversation to look at, it just makes it so much clearer.
Well,
From
it
going
helps you
through that
understand
conversation
immediately
with
to look at,
yourself.
well, how much revenue do we need? Are expenditures
You're
too
like,
high? Are
okay,
they too low?
Right.
Where do we need to be? Well, so $5 million, and that was after extensive analysis of our cash flow. There are lots of different benchmarks out there. We looked at 90 days true cash, we looked at a percentage of revenue, a percentage of expenditures, looking at you all, because different folks were on finance committee at that time.
The percentage was winning for a while, and then this seemed to be a more solid way to do it. We looked at what other schools do, what other
Across the state.
I was surprised to learn that some schools don't have a benchmark.
Yeah,
And
they
they're
just-
kind of,
Just winging it.
Right, they might
winging it.
wait to get right here and go, gosh, we're deficit spending, and all of a sudden, I don't have cash flow over the course of the fiscal year to meet payroll in a certain month,
Right.
or because we don't, like, our cash flow hits differently, like I said before, like our second most material revenue source is income tax, and we get our payments quarterly. You know, we get our property tax in 2 big chunks, if you think about how you pay your property tax bills, and, maybe January and then July, we get those payments in February and August. So we don't get monthly revenue distributions, only from the state, and we know that's the lowest source. So that's the one that's absolutely not growing,
Right.
right?
Right.
Right?
It's good to see it.
No, I thank you. We will, well, we'll be back in 5 or 6 months to have this conversation again, but it will be interesting to see, you talk about trends and 1 year with the income tax. It's so hard to know that you're in a trend until a few years
Right.
go by
Yeah.
and you realize it is a trend.
On that question, so you said it's down 2%, that's where it's right now.
Yes,
Trending
the
in
first,
this
the
year,
first 2 payments, the first 3 quarters,
2 quarters of 4, is that, so we're halfway through.
we're halfway
And
through.
that's down 2% versus projection of.
Yes, our first quarter was down significantly. Our second quarter rebounded a bit,
Yeah.
which is why we felt, I don't want to say comfortable because I'm never comfortable with this assumption, but felt inclined to flatline it as opposed to forecasting a decline. Because we did see a rebound in the second
Oh,
collection,
Adjusted 3% versus the, to
adjusted to 0 as
versus
opposed to
3%.
a stress, yeah, as opposed to a decline.
So you would say you believe for fiscal year 24 will end up roughly in 0. Perhaps that's your projection.
That's the forecast. That's what we're modeling today.
That's the- Oh,
That's what we're modeling based on the data that we have available today.
Signed in blood.
Well, the income comes in different ways
It does.
too, and that's also hard to then.
Yes, that's a great point.
Forecast
We do,
what is
we do
happening.
collect it in 3 different chunks and we forecast it differently. Our biggest bucket is withholding, so paycheck income, kind of for lack of a better explanation. And then we, the second chunk, and they sort of come equally, payments with returns and estimated payments. And so they, again, we forecast them differently, we do the analytics on them differently, they perform differently, unexpectedly perform differently, they don't, their performance doesn't always correlate one way or the other. We spend great length of time in finance committee deep diving into the collection of income tax. That's a good point, Judy. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you.
There's more coming behind you.
No.
Okay. I'll back. All right, thank you. So this is gonna come back in a couple of minutes in terms of agreeing with this, forecast. But for the moment, let's go on to the board reports. The finance committee met at 5:30 this evening. However, much of what we talked about, Rhonda just explained. I don't know if there's any other thing you'd like to add, especially in terms of the legislative or.
We reviewed the analytics, as we do at every meeting. We just reviewed the components of the 5-year forecast. We heard a legislative update. We had been monitoring House Bill 187. 187 was a potential impact to the way that property tax values were going to be calculated. Of course, we were watching that closely because we're super interested in how the values are going to be used in our special needs consents to calculate our debt capacity for a future bond issue. And so we've been closely watching that. And what we've learned about House Bill 187 is that it has taken a shift and we expect it to be introduced in the Senate Ways and Means tomorrow. Instead of changing the calculation of how values are calculated and then therefore taxes paid, we expect that it will be a homestead exemption expansion. And that exemption expansion will be impacting those who have income below below $36,000. Their exemption will be higher than it is currently. And this is what we expect to be proposed, obviously. And then it would be a sliding scale, but then anybody with income over 75,000 would have 0 exemption. So that's what we expect to learn about tomorrow. So pretty pleased with that shift. It seems to, at least on paper, give relief to some folks who would need it, and doesn't shift our calculation that we need for a bond issue. A couple other reviewed a couple other pieces of legislation that are going to be in House Ways and Means that are also some adjustments to the homestead exemption, but really nothing that's material.
So this we would not necessarily have to have a file for an exemption or some some kind of help from the state in terms of our bond levy and the fact that we've already started the process of the.
We will still need the special needs authorization, but our values that we expect to be approved won't be impacted.
Okay.
So our plan gets moved along as we had it moving.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Anything else? Citizens advisory. We, at this point, the groups are meeting on their own, individually by their particular project, and I don't. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, we
Edith,
had some
or-
scheduling conflicts, for the November date, so we canceled the November meetings, groups met or are meeting on their own. Yeah. Mhm.
All right, so now we're at the superintendent committee liaison report, belonging committee. You guys have met, correct?
We did.
We did. Yeah, very positive meeting. I mean, Jim, I think, called a brilliant audible and, given world events that were going on, brought in a rabbi that you're working with on your project.
Part of the
Rabbi
Leaders in Light project, yeah.
Eric Ari John.
Mhm.
And very healthy conversation, and really presented an overview of Israeli-Palestinian conflict, historical, contemporary, and just really impressed on all of the complexity of it all. And we realized we're not going to get it right in any conversation that we have right off the bat, and it's okay with that. Just keep the dialogue going.
Was
So
this for the whole collaborative?
it was,
Like-
it was
Yeah.
here, and he had a PowerPoint presentation, very moving and probably one of the best conversations we've had in recent.
Yeah, it was great. And we used that as a springboard to open up conversations at each staff. And so we've met with high school, primary. This week we're meeting with middle school, and it's just members of the big team, just opening up, creating a space for a conversation, just to talk with our staff about how to support students, how to support one another, how to support families, when someone's been impacted, by the conflict that's going on. And we see that happening, in our country, but here locally in Cincinnati, you hear of things that are happening too. So we just want to make sure that we're prepared to, again, create a space so that our students can feel this sense of belonging to talk about what's happening in their world. That's really what it's about.
I thought one of the best parts about it is it's a global reality, it's not in the US soil, so just a different context and conversation to have in the belonging discussion, a difficult one to understand well, to kind of look at both sides of it, which we processed and sort of practicing being in those difficult conversations. I think whenever we then bring that back to relative to gender or other dynamics that we're processing daily in our district, it just helps people have developed that muscle, so know how to do that in a way that's constructive. So, and I was on Zoom, so I appreciate the group. I think it was maybe Ashley with the computer or someone kind of allowing me to participate on that one. So
That's great.
It was good.
Good, thank you. Community engagement. That would be everyone.
Well, I went to Pinhole Photography, saw some of you there, that's awesome. Eighth
That was
graders,
wonderful.
so, yeah, it was so cool.
I'm so glad that they're back to that.
And now I like them today. So, that was just neat to see their artwork, and then clearly you see students and parents and loved ones checking everything out. And the art teachers are there. And then I think probably Susie's given stuff, but it's like concerts are coming up, so I'm sure that list is gonna be long when she reads it, because I feel like that's the biggest, like now it's the season
It's
of,
that time.
the things are coming up
I
more
believe,
so.
are we missing a band concert tonight?
Next
Next,
December.
the December meeting.
Yeah.
Well, this and a basketball thing. Oh, yeah.
it's 19-13 at the end of the first quarter.
Okay.
Is that real?
Thanks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We're leading.
All right.
I think this is our first regular meeting since the election, so congratulations.
yeah.
Oh,
thank
thank
you.
you.
Incumbents.
Thank you.
There's a lot of community engagement, a lot of. Right there, actually, that was probably large. Yeah, but really, when I'm looking at, we had OSBA, so that took us away from the community, but for us, like helpful, I think, just with community, and it's always a good reminder. We got to talk about it a lot at the planning meeting, just what we each learned from it, so it's always a good takeaway of how we can re-engage with the community, is kind of how I look at it, even though we were gone, but it's a good reset for me for us to think about, like, what are we doing well, where can we be improving as a board? So for me, it kind of fits in that community engagement moving forward.
Look at your point, because not everyone, they don't understand what the OSBA is, you
Yeah.
know, just this annual opportunity for us being there. And just the things you connect to, copper wise, about us being better with each other, for each other, with the group, the community and stuff, so it's a neat, every year, a neat opportunity to do.
Yeah. I like that. But I do think when I'm looking at the calendar in terms of other, community engagement, I feel like it's a lot that's coming that. I don't know,
Okay,
refer to
so we'll-
Sweet Susie now.
Turn to Susie then.
Okay.
In addition to the athletic competitions going on this weekend, we have the middle school drama production of Twice Upon a Time. So that is on Friday and Saturday, December 1st and 2nd at 7 PM at the middle school in Fay Auditorium. And then the concerts start. So on Tuesday, December 5th at the high school, we'll have, 5th and 6th grade orchestra concert at 6:30. 7th and 8th grade orchestra concert at 8. And then the next day, on Wednesday, December 6th, at the high school, we have the Wyoming High School Holiday Showcase at 7:30 PM. It has all of our high school groups performing. It's a beautiful, moving concert every year. Then our Wyoming School Music Association will have Fortissimo to Go at 9 o'clock to noon on Saturday, December 9th at the high school. And then Monday, December 18th at Wyoming High School, we will have band concerts. 5th and 6th grade at 7 PM, 7th and 8th grade at 8 PM. And then that night, we also have our next regular board meeting, 7 PM here at the Wyoming City School Central Office. Then Tuesday, December 19th at the high school, we've got choir concerts. 5th and 6th grade at 7 PM, 7th and 8th grade at 8 PM. And then we start winter break right after that, which goes Monday, December 25th to Friday, January 5th, with school resuming on Monday, January 8th. That takes it.
Okay.
It's the calendar year.
Wow.
Matt, would you like to give us a basketball update?
No, so the game is happening now. I asked my wife to give updates at the end of each quarter.
Okay,
So that we can be in touch with, you know,
all right, which is
part-
great.
partially there, you know. We're winning, 19-13.
All right, well, let's keep going here.
Keep going.
The other quick, like, I guess,
Another quarter.
community engagement, when we do city school meeting, that's Wednesday, like, some of those meetings are didn't
Coming up.
necessarily
Mhm.
happen, so that's coming as well.
Correct.
I think that's why I'm off, I'm like, so yeah, that will be Wednesday morning.
The other big community engagement that we have going on right now is the feedback form that we have out there for
Mhm.
primary facilities. That probably takes us right into the facility.
And the deadline is?
Wednesday.
And how is that going? Cause I feel like I try to tell people to do it if they didn't, you know.
Before break, I checked and we had over 150 respondents, and then we're still trying to get it back out. So tonight we sent out the 48-hour reminder. Tomorrow we'll send out a 24-hour reminder,
Okay,
and then it'll
Okay.
close on the 29th.
just to encourage.
And we may
people
have very
to
many
fill it
more.
out.
I just did not have time to look at it today.
Right, but it
To
wasn't.
see where we were, and we did,
3,000.
we sent a reminder right before break,
Okay.
so I'm hopeful that there
Yeah.
were people.
Okay.
And then we asked the steering committee to promote it with people as they were out and about during
Yeah.
break too, so I just haven't.
Okay.
Okay. All right, and let's go to the facility committee.
My update is really just about the timeline. So going back to October 30th, when we had the community forum, as Susie shared, those surveys are due in 2 days. We will have a superintendent's committee meeting on the 30th. And so that's coming up later this week, and we'll be able to reflect back on all that feedback that's brought in. Feedback on the options, feedback on just general comments that have been made, and then frequently asked questions. We'll be reviewing those. And then we have a steering committee, the primary facility steering committee, they'll be meeting on December 11th. And then that all works to have a board update on December 17th, which is our next regular meeting.
I saw it, but no, that's it.
Accept
Sorry
it,
for
yeah.
reminding
Now
me
you're
there was
going,
something
yes.
else.
Okay, planning and goal setting. We have a meeting coming up tomorrow.
Yep, and we met on the 15th. And so we had a meeting just to review our, one of the new things we're talking about is this idea of a scoreboard. And it really focuses in on what are the goals and objectives that we have in the district, and then what are the goals of each building, and trying to focus more and more on evidence and what's the evidence of growth. And so we started really looking at each one of those goal areas and talking about the work that's happening across the district, to just get in that natural rhythm of looking at the initiatives and how they're showing evidence of growth in whatever that goal area is.
Easy to underestimate the discussion you're in around evidence, what? Most people who set goals don't really want to have measures that people can be held accountable for, and so like having that, establishing it and actually tracking toward it, it's a really big deal. So I know it's hard to put something that's definitive and can be measurable and then be held accountable. We did it or we didn't, and just kind of keep going. So
Sure.
I appreciate it. I think it's very helpful. So.
Policy review, if you don't mind, I'd like to skip that since we're coming up on the second reading soon. Student achievement. You had a meeting?
Yeah.
Yep, we did. I'll just share a brief update on that. We met on November 3rd, and we were really talking about topics related to CCP. That was a study in one of our CAC teams last year, so we just continued that conversation on all areas related to CCP, and then focused on the ongoing work that is happening and needs to happen to identify ways to recognize our graduates, and what are the best ways to recognize our graduates in their entire experience, and then in the actual event of graduation. And add to
Very productive meeting. This is an excellent presentation by Ashley. Some data that really gave some insight on some things we need to consider, maybe looking forward, and how we determine excellence, academic excellence, and how we recognize it publicly. So huge step in the right direction, building on the CAC study from last year. So a real big step in the right direction. So thanks to Jen and Ashley for that.
Of the parameters, on what's legal for us to do was helpful. The data, looking back multiple years in our district on what's happened and how people have leveraged CCP, what's going on with that is good. So as we think about what do, we can take right steps, at the right pace for our district and communicate those things well. If you think about changing the way we're doing things, so very helpful.
Right.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Board of Education report, we have a number of policies. We're in our second read. Is there anyone want to comment on them, or?
I didn't receive any questions from the last time.
Okay.
So.
Then may I have a motion?
Julie. Okay.
May I have a motion to approve the Board of Education report then?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And roll call.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. G?
Yes.
Mrs. Dollar?
Yes,
Mrs. Barker?
Yes.
Mr. Bellmeyer?
Yes.
thank you. Treasurer's report.
Thanks, Jeannie. Item A, approval of the minutes from the regular meeting on October 23rd and the planning meeting of November 15th. Item B, approve the statement of revenues and expenditures for month ending October 31st. Item C, accept with appreciation the list of donations. Did you all see that those are linked now?
Yes.
Okay. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
That was very helpful, thank you.
Item D, the appropriation adjustments for the month of November. Item E, approval of the 5-year forecast as presented. Item F, the annual resolution requesting authorization to file the modified tax budget. This is just the format that's used by the Hamilton County Auditor, but requires an annual request and approval by the board. Item G, approve the report, please.
All right, thank you. May I have a motion to do so?
So moved.
Second?
Your third.
And a roll call.
Mrs. G?
Yes.
Mrs. Dollar?
Yes.
Mrs. Barker?
Yes.
Mr. Bellmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent's report.
Okay, just 5 personnel items. Number 1 is a recommendation to approve second semester long-term substitute. That's Sarah Rutner, long-term subbing in kindergarten position. Number 2, recommendation to approve unpaid leave for the staff member. Number 3, recommendation to approve athletic worker, and this is for work done during basketball camp. Number 4, recommendation to approve athletic supplemental contracts. You can see that's for high school boys soccer and middle school 7th grade boys basketball. And then number 5, recommendation to approve the non-athletic supplemental contract, and that's for high school music orchestra director.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve? And I will second.
No, you got it.
Roll call.
Mrs. Fowler?
Yes.
Mrs. Rogers?
Yes.
Mr. Feldmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheets?
Yes.
Thank you. Discussion. The
Okay.
calendar.
All right, yes, calendar. We love to talk about calendar. This is good. This is good. This is good. This is helpful. As you know, in October, we spoke about the current calendar. We spoke about the date of Monday, April 8th, which is the Monday after spring break. And we said there's a little bit of a challenge on that day because that is a solar eclipse day.
Yes.
And the challenge was that the eclipse actually happens at, I want to say it's 3:08. Yes, which is right in the middle of dismissal. And so we brought it as a first read, just to consider, think about. And I went to each of our PAC meetings to just to talk about different options and get some feedback from our PAC representatives, which was really, really helpful. And so I thought tonight I'd just share that feedback. Ultimately, I'll take this back to our district leadership team. The DLT is the group that really starts to generate ideas for calendars. So I think it's important to take this feedback back to that group. And then the goal would be to bring it back to this team, the board team in December. Depending upon what it says, I don't know, it'll be from that conversation. But feedback was interesting. And so at our primary meeting, and I'm just sharing just major takeaways. So several in the group thought that, and this is PAC feedback from our primary PAC members, that students, families might take students out for the day or earlier in the day on their own. They thought that possibly we could partner with the city for students to go to the rec center. They were wondering if we could consider removing the day from the student calendar, which is not having it as a student day, and adjusting the calendar at some other point. One of the comments that was made a couple of times, but came from the primary first, was the need to purchase glasses, the special protective lenses, the glasses for students, regardless of whether or not there was a calendar change. The families thought that would be very helpful. Middle school feedback was really more focused around keeping the current schedule. One comment was, can we keep the current schedule, but focus on publicizing the safety factor. Another comment was the fact that changing the calendar can be difficult for families sometimes, and many people might struggle with that change. There was a thought of, can we shift the day longer, but then that possibly represented some challenges for families who wouldn't be able to support that. And then again, comments about glasses being helpful for families. High school, overall, the group felt the 2-hour early dismissal that was being proposed was a good plan. So it's a little bit, a little bit scattered, and it makes sense just because of the age of the students. So again, we'll take it back to DLT. We'll be talking about, do we move forward with the plan for a 2-hour early dismissal for all buildings, or do we talk about something that might be more appropriately done with middle school and high school versus primary? Because primary is actually in school during the eclipse, so there could be an opportunity, because they don't dismiss until 3:30. So there could be an opportunity to do something that's layered. Right.
Is this on the agenda to talk about at our city school meeting tonight?
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, we can definitely add that.
City school meeting, the meeting between the schools and the city.
Yeah,
Mhm.
just thinking about the
On
rec center
Wednesday.
opportunity and what.
Yeah.
Yeah, so next step is to go to, we can have that conversation and also go to our DLT. But the plan would be to come back in December with what that final recommendation would be.
Okay.
And then we want to make sure, because if it's changed, it's got to sit for another first read, another month for a first read, and then be approved in January. So we want to make sure that we get, if the
Yes.
point of the change, we get a change made so families can be prepared for it.
Okay, good, thank you. Do you have an update you would like to share?
Yeah, I thought it'd be fun to, well, first of all, I just wanted to say welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. It was wonderful to welcome back staff today. Students come tomorrow. I just had many conversations today about people, and we say it all the time. People are what make this place so special. And so it's always good to be back. and to hear of some of the celebrations that are coming up in December. Amazing time. But I thought I'd shift our focus back to today. And we don't often talk about the professional development days that we have. And this day after Thanksgiving is relatively new. We've just done it for 2 years, I think. And the reason that it was put at this time was because we thought it might be an opportunity for families, just with Thanksgiving holiday and travel. But it's close to a point in time when many of our teachers receive data back from the state on student growth. And that data usually doesn't come back until late October, early November. And so this is a placeholder for us to have conversations about data, but conversations about all different kinds of professional development. So what I thought would be fun is just to share some of, this is not all of the topics that were discussed in our buildings today. So we had staff starting out today with wellness opportunities. And so that was across the district, just to focus in on wellness of our staff. We spoke about supporting student behavior, safety drill procedures, professional development on a tool called Book Creator, looking at unpacking the standards, and that was our primary teachers were doing that, looking at, now they're using trimesters for their new report card system. So they're looking at the second trimester and really unpacking those standards to understand what students should be able to do and how to report that to families. Looking at tier 1 and tier 2 is executive functioning behavior supports, educational technology for special teachers, looking at high impact instructional strategies. We talked about the name John Hattie, and speaking of evidence, the evidence behind certain instructional strategies. Value added goes to the data, value added outcomes, curriculum alignment, artificial intelligence was really being looked at our middle school and our high school. And again, the whole idea of data conversations and also looking at Canvas and how to dive deeper into making appropriate plans for students. So again, just some of the topics. It's a great day, many things going on, really productive.
Good, thank you. All right, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Oh, very good. Go for it.
Mrs. Barker?
Yes.
Mr. Feldmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. G?